Welcome to Finance at the Jobsite, the podcast where construction finance meets the field. I'm your host, Rishi Srivastava, founder of Being Human. In each episode, I sit down with construction CFOs, controllers, owners, project managers, IT leaders, ERP consultants, and industry experts to uncover how they connect the back office with the field, choose and implement technology, manage cash flow, and drive profitable projects. Whether you are running the numbers, leading the team, or designing the systems that keep projects moving, this is your place to learn what's working, what's broken, and what's next in construction finance. Today, our guest is Krystal Madonia. Krystal, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Rishi.
The first section here is on your career journey, non-traditional path to construction CFO. You didn't go high school to college to career. Take us into the moment you realized, quote unquote, I'm going to build a real finance career anyway.
Yeah.
What job were you in and what did you do next?
Yeah. So like you said, I took about 6 years in between high school and college, which is definitely not traditional.
Yeah.
Took accounting classes in high school and was advised that I should go into accounting, but was resistant to that idea. And also for financial reasons, didn't go straight to college. So I did a little bit of community college here and there, but about 4 or 5 years after I graduated high school, I was basically doing, a full bookkeeping kind of light accounting position. I was working for a propane company, of all things, doing AR and collections and a lot of other accounting related items. And I was barely making above minimum wage and was not going anywhere, and could see that I was just going to hit this wall of not being able to get any further unless I went back to college. So finally took the plunge, finished my associates, and then transferred to Western Washington University and finished my college career. And then from there, it kind of got a little bit more traditional. I went from college to public accounting, and public accounting to private, and then back to public, and then back to private.
Yeah, it's definitely unusual to have that much a gap in the 6 years that you talked about.
Yeah, it was nice because when I did go to college, then I was really focused on what I wanted to do, since I was, further along in life, a little bit more mature, I guess I would say, not in the party mode of many college students. So really was able to just put my head into focusing on getting my degree and where I wanted to go with my career.
From receptionist / bookkeeper energy to controller level thinking. Tell a story about the first time you were trusted with something, quote unquote, above your pay grade. What happened and why did they pick you?
So one of the companies in that kind of bookkeeping era before I, fully committed to going back to college, it was a trucking company that worked both in construction and the agricultural space, and they were growing pretty rapidly. And when I came in, I had taken some accounting classes in college above what I had taken in high school, and had some things I wanted to try. And a lot of the things were process and policy based, trying to build up some of those things that a small mom and pop business that was growing didn't have. And so they really kind of said, take the reins and run with it. So we went from, a growing fleet of equipment to actually going through and properly numbering, IDing all of our equipment, inventorying our equipment, and then starting to do accounting for that equipment. And then that segued into, being the head for the DOT audit that we did. And a lot of those things were, looking back, I was very young and very inexperienced, but it was great exposure because it segued into a lot of the work that I did later in my career.
Document accounting is not easy.
Yeah, it's a beast.
I had Yvette as one of the guests, Yvette Tobin. She talked about document accounting in full length, what all
Yeah,
goes in there.
yeah.
Public accounting, audit to industry and back. What's one fieldwork moment from your audit days that permanently changed how you run accounting inside a contractor today. Your profile shows deep audit leadership experience, including assurance leadership roles.
I think so. One of my favorite, I guess, audit memories that I look back on that I think shaped me the most was my first audit, which I can tell you, who the client was, who the audit team was, where we were, what I was wearing. It's burned into my brain in a good way. I was very, very fortunate. It was a construction client. It was a very clean construction client, which, as auditors know, there's good, clean clients, and then there's some that are messier. And so it was a very clean client, and I had a very great team that brought me up in my infancy in public accounting and taught me many, many soft skills, surprisingly, in that first audit week. The senior on that job at the time, who I still stay connected with, he did so much coaching in that period of how to talk to clients, how to talk to non-accountants. As auditors, we're going in to try and find the mistakes, but how to broach the conversation of mistakes with folks instead of going in and saying, hey, this is wrong, posing it as can you walk me through what is happening here? And making it not be a defensive conversation, but an open conversation. The partner that was on that job, taught me a ton about getting to know people, making a connection with people before asking for, whatever specific question or answer you need. Then just observing the whole team and how they would have communications with the client of, really listening to what they were saying, picking out the little tidbits that they wanted to expand on that would get them the actual answers that they needed.
One thing I think about audit is who's paying for the audit. Is in construction the client who you're auditing, are they the one paying, or is it like
Yes.
somebody else?
Yep.
Okay.
So when you're in public accounting, you're independent, but the construction company is the one who is engaging you. They're the one who have hired you, who have chosen you. And it's good to have a great long-term relationship with them. You're going to, in hope, you would be working with them year after year after year. So you want to maintain that good relationship. So you don't want to be going in and ruffling feathers and trying to make them feel like they don't know what they're doing or that they made mistakes. People are human, people make mistakes. And a lot of the times the mistakes that you find in public accounting are just mistakes. It's human error, thankfully. But really building those relationships, and construction's a small world, as are other industries. So it's always good to have solid relationships with your clients or anybody that you come into contact with, because you never know where you're going to cross paths later in life if you change careers.
And what is the reason for auditing a construction company? A lot of times you don't even need to audit construction companies.
Yeah, so I did audits and financial statement reviews and compilations. So I kind of did across the board in my time in public accounting, but it's usually driven off of either, bank or bonding or both. So, the construction's bonding company wants it, the construction's bank for their line of credit, or for, if they have long-term financing, that's usually what's going to be driving their need for some kind of financial statement engagement.
Fast forward to today. You became CFO at Haley Construction in 2025 and moved up quickly there. What did your first 30 to 60 days look like? What did you walk into?
Yeah, so I walked into a fantastic company. I actually, when I interviewed, the position they had posted was our kind of accounting staff position, if you will. Moved to Arizona in 2023. There was no contractors hiring at the time that I moved here. So I actually worked for a law firm for a couple of years, who ironically is one of the law firms that our construction company uses. But they posted this position, and I was overqualified for the position they were posting for, but I could see from their website and their LinkedIn page that their CFO had his tagline at the time was happily working in my golden years. So he was wanting to retire. So I applied on the whim that, maybe they would want somebody to step into that CFO role down the road, which they did, thankfully. So when I hired, we did the interview knowing that I would do that position until the current CFO was ready to retire, which at the time he was saying he wanted to stay another year or two. And then I came in May, and by August, he was ready to retire. So he ended up stepping down at the end of September. But he was a fantastic CFO, had a similar background. He had worked in public accounting and then worked a number of years for different construction contractors in Arizona, had a wealth of knowledge, had built a super strong accounting department, super strong processes and procedures. And so now, I'm coming into a very clean accounting department, which is fantastic in a company that's wanting to grow. So I'm getting the opportunity to give some of my experience with just process and policy procedure implementation to operations, if you will, and how they all cohesively tie into finance.
I guess as soon as he found the right successor, he was ready to retire.
Yeah, he expedited that quite quickly, but it was great that I did get to do the lower level role here at our company, because the person that we ended up hiring to step into that role when I moved up was somebody who only had a year of experience. She's fantastic. I absolutely love her, but she had only a year of accounting experience under her belt. It wasn't in construction. And so having the firsthand knowledge of doing the processes for this company, because the processes are all similar, but each company has their own nuances. So knowing firsthand, here's how we do it here, was good for me to be able to train her in how she was going to execute on those, because she wasn't coming in with experience.
The next section here, Crystal, is on Haley Construction, 70 years, third generation, mixed project types. Paint the picture of Haley Construction. Tell a drive around town story. What's one project in Prescott that makes you proud because it shows what the company stands for?
Yeah, we are quite literally the drive around town construction company. Haley Construction was founded in 1960 in Globe, Arizona. And then in 1965, it was relocated to Prescott. And it started as a residential housing developer. Jillian, our current owner, her grandparents, the tagline is her grandfather said, "I had a borrowed $1,000 and a pickup truck, and so began Haley Construction." And so the location of our main office is actually the original location from when they relocated to Prescott. It was an old dairy. They bought the house. We have a separate building from the house that our offices are in, but the neighborhood, it's a residential neighborhood that we're grandfathered into. The residential neighborhood our offices are in, every house except for the house here on this property and the one across the street were built by Haley. And if you drive up the street, most of the houses are built by Haley. And if you drive down the street, most of the houses are built by Haley. So they built, a good number of the houses in the area. And then I went back through our job list the other day just in preparation for this, and it kind of about 1990 was when they started dabbling in construction. And then the early 2000s is when the commercial construction really started ramping up. But I think we're definitely much more on the commercial side now. So I'd say we're about 80% commercial and 20% high-end custom residential builds. And I'm so proud to work here and proud of what we do. But I think right now the project I'm most proud of is we just completed a Center for Learning and Innovation at Yavapai College, which is, the big college here in town, one of the big colleges here in town. And it's a state-of-the-art technology facility. They took their existing library, gutted the whole thing, and they have a 360-degree immersive cube room where you go in and video is projected on the ceiling and the floor and all the walls and all sorts of technology. And it's just great to see, it's one of the biggest projects we've done and one that we're very, very proud of. And we're right in the thick of grand open. They had their soft opening and then we're about to do the grand opening. So we're right in the middle of that process. But just driving around town, we can point out anywhere, municipal buildings, medical buildings, retail spaces, higher education, houses. We can go have lunch in a restaurant that we built. We have company parties there often. So it's just fun to be able to point out so many different things that we've done.
Yeah. Actually, who is Haley?
So Haley is the last name. So Jillian Haley is our current owner. Her grandparents started it, and one of the things she's very proud of is her grandmother and grandfather were 50% owners. So having her grandmother as a 50% owner in the 60s was not common to have female ownership in that time. And then it passed down to her father and her uncle, and then her and her stepbrother were involved, and then her and her stepbrother took over, and then a couple years ago, her stepbrother wanted to kind of take a step back. So he's still involved, but he's not an owner anymore. And so now it's Jillian. So we're 100% women owned.
Nice. I'm originally from India, and my mom's generation, they didn't have property rights actually. So when her dad died, she didn't get any property. But now my sister, she has property rights. So the laws changed in like 2010, whereby women now have property rights on dad and mom's property. It's kind of interesting how that helps women's empowerment now in India.
Yeah.
Property rights.
Yeah. No, it's crazy to think about, the timelines of some of those things of, wow, it feels like it was a long time ago, but it really wasn't that long ago, especially in some of the other areas.
Yeah, actually, my sister-in-law, she was telling my sister, don't come to my dad's or mom's house, because you don't belong here. You married, go to your,
Oh gosh. Oh no. Oh my God.
But like I told my sister, you have property rights now. You own a
Yeah.
piece of this property when my mom and dad dies.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad for your sister that she has that.
Yeah. Residential routes to commercial scale. What was the inflection point where the business truly shifted toward commercial? What changed operationally and financially?
So I'd say 2005 to 2010 for Haley Construction is definitely kind of the turning point. There's two very large colleges in town, Yavapai College and Emory-Riddle Aeronautical University. And that was about the time that Haley started really getting in on projects for those. They obviously had other commercial projects as well, but that was definitely kind of the turning point for the commercial shift. And I think it just changes, it changes everything about a company, but you go from having a large number of jobs to having a smaller number of jobs that are much larger generally. So just changing the game in the size and scope and quantity of what you're doing. But also it just opens the door, with houses other than, you've got your average size house or you have a custom house. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a lot more opportunities in the commercial space as far as you've got higher education, you've got municipal, you've got restoration work, which we love to do, you've got retail, you've got just so many different things that are so nuanced and so different. And so it just opens up the doors for so many opportunities in different spaces. And then financially, I think it's just kind of the turning point of where things started getting bigger. Since Jillian's taken over as owner, and even when Alan and Jillian were involved, going after more of this higher education work, trying to grow the company. The company's grown substantially in the last 3 to 5 years. So just having that growth, the commercial brings those opportunities and makes those opportunities, I think, a little bit easier to get into.
Yeah, and commercial, when you have these long jobs, uh, the work in progress report becomes very important.
hmm
So, what do you use for your accounting to do work in progress?
So we are on a little bit of an antiquated ERP. So we're on a program called Construction Partner. It does the job, but it's definitely not as fancy as some of the things that you hear people on right now. It's not an Acumatica. It's not a it's not even a Sage 300. It's definitely very basic. But it's working for now, but we definitely have on the horizon to be searching for a new ERP in the next year or two. I probably opened the door for every single sales rep to reach out to me now, but so as far as our financial side of things, we are on that program, and it does a fine job. We're able to do all of the job costing we need to do, but it obviously doesn't integrate directly with our operation system, which is Procore we use for project management. So we are going to be looking for something that has more of an integration with Procore in the future.
A lot of systems, they are moving towards the web, and in the cloud-based systems, they are
hmm
very important in nowadays.
Yeah, so Procore is, all web-based. We have a scheduling program that we're just rolling out right now that's web-based called Outbill, which integrates with Procore. So yeah, we're seeing definitely a huge shift towards the web-based.
And one of the big pain point is like transitioning these accounting systems hard. It takes a
hmm
long time to move from one
Yeah.
system to another. It's just so much chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I have it on my agenda for 2027.
Yeah, yeah. I have a friend CFO. He was telling, "Oh, I don't want to take any ERP migration projects. It's like it's pain in the A."
Yeah, yeah. So this year we're focusing on we brought on a new IT consultant that's helping us, make sure we have really strong foundations in all of our IT systems before we start shopping for this ERP system because, we're growing, we want to make sure everything's super solid. So we're working with a IT company that works specifically with construction contractors so that they can kind of come in and evaluate where we're at with just our baseline IT structure before we start going and exploring those options.
Based on what you're seeing in the market, what do you think is the top three ERPs for you?
Oh gosh. I haven't really even had a chance to start digging into it yet. I mean, I hear Intact is obviously popular. Acumatica is really popular, and there's a third one that the name is escaping me right now that I see talked about. The CFMA forums, if folks aren't members of CFMA, definitely go join CFMA because I mean, even just for the Connection Cafe, which is the online forum where you can post a question, people answer. I mean, it's worth it just from that standpoint. But I see, this topic is basically always going in some form or another as people talking about ERPs, which ERP integrations with ERPs. So I'll be definitely digging into that more this summer.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
10 to $20 million revenue. What's the one finance slash ops discipline that matters most at this size, but most contractors still underinvest in?
I think if you don't already have a solid WIP schedule, obviously a solid WIP schedule that you're updating very regularly from a finance standpoint and financials, I think those kind of are a given. But I would say standard operating procedures, your SOPs, that's one of our main focuses in 2026 is recognizing that as we're growing, a lot of our knowledge is institutional knowledge. And so as we're bringing new folks on, getting that institutional knowledge, having it in a way that we can, hand somebody a guidebook of this is how Haley does things. You know, this is how we deliver the quality that Haley delivers. We really need to have that better documented. So we have a really solid accounting SOP, and we're starting to build out our SOPs for the operations side of things to make sure that as new people are coming in, they're getting consistent instruction, consistent training. Everybody's doing things consistently across all the Haley projects.
Institutional knowledge transfer is such a big problem.
Yeah, we had a superintendent that had been here for 40 years that retired last year. And then right now, one of our project engineers, she's been here for 15 years. Our COO's been here for 15 years. Our owner obviously was born and raised in the company. So we have a lot of people with a ton of that institutional knowledge, but making sure that we make that accessible to everybody, whether they have been here for 15 years or whether they started last week.
The next section is translating finance to field. Your quote unquote non accountant speak superpower. You said you learned how to translate accounting into field language. Give us a real example. What was the quote unquote annoying ask you made of a PM/super? And how did you explain the why so they actually bought in?
Yeah, so I think having the experience of being the lower level employee before going college to public accounting gave me that understanding of what it's like when you're working in a position and somebody's asking you to do something that's just adding to your day and you don't understand why, which has helped when I'm interacting with my peers to say like, hey, I really need this and here's why, because the why is always more helpful for folks. So, just today, one of our PMs, I was asking her if, the client had executed all of their change orders and then elaborated that, hey, in our executive meeting this week, we want to be reviewing the budget for this job. So I want to make sure I can be factoring those in, just giving the context for the why I'm asking for those things. And I think recently, some of the recent challenges we've had is, Prescott's a growing area, but it's still a smaller area. So you end up with subcontractors that are very mom and pop. They're great at their operations, but their administrative side usually is them doing their own accounting or maybe one person helping them in their office, but they're not a sophisticated national general contractor level of accounting. So getting them to understand AIAs, pay apps, and the information we need to get them set up properly, that's been kind of a work in process of, a lot of times the contact point is our project manager. So the project manager is the one making the initial setup with these subcontractors when we're starting these projects and helping them understand like why I need a W-9, why I need their certificate of insurance, why I need all these things. And instead of just saying, I need you to get this from them, helping give them the tools of here's a welcome guide that we've made, which, we had one and then we're just continually updating it. So here's a welcome guide you can send to the subcontractors of what's needed from Haley to work with us. And then more recently, there's a great video we found online of how to fill out a pay application. So there's a two-part video, one for the G702 and one for the G703. And I just made up an email template and gave it to all of the folks on our team that may need to ask for that from a sub and said, here, you can copy and paste this in. It has links to the videos. It has a Excel template version of it that they can fill out. So instead of us just pushing back and saying, you need to submit the correct documentation, we're sending them an email that says like, we need you to send the correct documentation. Here's a template if your system doesn't create this template for you. And here's videos that walk you through how to fill it out.
They did an experiment in psychology. So some people were copying pages in front of a copier. And this one person, she wants to cut across and get her copy fast. So in one setup, this person went and just said, hey, can I cut you across and get that copy done quickly?
Mm-hmm.
So she got about 30% compliance. In another setup, what they did was she went to the people and said, I need to get this copied because these copies are important. Just framing because the compliance rate went up from 30 to 70%.
Absolutely.
Just giving even a random reason,
Yeah.
people start agreeing to you.
Yes, absolutely.
Tell a story about the worst disconnect you've seen between field ops and accounting at a prior company. What was the cost of that disconnect? time, margin, stress, rework?
Well, I mean, I think we've all seen a ton of examples, especially those of us on the audit, in the public side and the audit field. You get lots of experiences where you're looking through a WIP schedule and you have to go through an interview, like the profit margin on this job isn't great. What happened? And so most of the times it's a lack of communication somewhere, just a giant lack of communication, whether it was the plans weren't correct and we didn't catch it. It was, there was a specific material that needed to be ordered. And so we had to reorder the materials and we had rework and we had time delays. Most of these things always go back to a lack of communication. When I worked for Interwest Construction, it was kind of funny because one of my main roles was doing the accounting for all of the equipment. They're a heavy civil dirt work company, so they have lots and lots of yellow iron. And my husband was the lowboy driver at the time, and lowboy drivers are the ones that are hauling all the equipment. And there was numerous times where I would get a phone call from him that said, "Hey, did you know we were buying X piece of equipment today?" And I would say, "Oh, no, I was not aware. Let me go talk to the owner." And my husband would be ratting out the owner on spending equipment that we hadn't budgeted for. So it always just goes back to a lack of communication, I think. So the more you can be communicating, and as the companies get bigger, that's harder and harder to do. But the more you can be communicating, I pay attention to, fortunately, our team is small. We're in an office where we're all kind of close together and we can hear what's going on. And so I pay attention when I hear things that the PMs are saying on phone calls or in conversation in the office, because it's important for me to know what's going on with these jobs just as much as them, because I need to be able to help us budget before we get to the end of the job, not.
So important, those budgets. What's your personal playbook for getting info from the field without becoming quote unquote that person? Walk us through your actual approach, timing, tone, context, and what you do when someone ghosts you.
Well, I think I'm in the unique position with Haley that I started in a lower role than I'm in currently. So I was able to make really close relationships with our laborers and our superintendents, because that position is kind of a key point of contact for some of the day-to-day, administrative type tasks. So building up close relationships with our folks as much as possible, just so that they feel comfortable talking to me about whatever they want to talk about. And then just every time they're in, making sure I'm trying to have a conversation with them. I might not need to talk to a superintendent that walks into the office, but they're the ones out on the job. So I want to know what's going on. So I'm going to make a point to go say hi and ask them how things are going and see if I can get anything out of them that I didn't already know about the jobs. And then that way, when I'm coming to them with questions, they're not caught off guard. They feel comfortable hopefully feel comfortable talking to me. And also just trying to not be mad at them when they have bad news, because a lot of the time they're just the messenger of the bad news. So making them feel comfortable to come to me with bad news if they have it.
Field job's very tough. It's there's so many variables they're playing with. Weather, client demands, material quality, inspections. There's just so much chaos in the field.
Yeah, and just trying to be a resource that they feel comfortable coming to for anything. So, if they're trying to get a hold of the project manager for their job, they can feel comfortable calling me. And even if it's not really my job, I'll try and help them as best I can. So it's not uncommon for laborers to be calling me to be asking if they should be buying tools for our company, or what they should be doing about their pickup or whatnot. And like, we had a superintendent on a job, the PM for the job, she was in a meeting, so he couldn't get a hold of her, couldn't get a hold of our COO. So he called me and he's like, one of the subs on this job is really pushing back on me about following our safety protocols, and he's saying that he didn't sign anything that said. So I was able to go pull up their subcontract and email him a copy and say, just pull this up on your phone, show him, like, this is the subcontract they signed with the safety requirements that they acknowledged and they agreed to. So they need to be adhering to that. So it gave him the leverage to go back to them and say, well, this came from the office.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't the bad guy and he got to enforce what needed to be done.
Hats off to you for keeping the site safe.
Yeah, well, more for our superintendent, but yeah, I was glad I could just help him get the resource he needed in that moment to be able to make sure we were following the protocols.
The next section is systems and ERP reality, from quote unquote archaic tools to Procore first decisions. You are on a legacy ERP now and planning a conversion in 2027. Tell the story of the moment you knew we can't keep operating like this. What broke or what became impossible?
Yeah, so I mean our ERP is functioning, but there's definitely some major holes in it. One of the previous contractors I worked for, they were on what they would have considered an archaic ERP system at the time, and this was, almost 10 years ago. And their system at least allowed for accounting to put an invoice into the system and shoot it to the project manager, and the project manager would have access to code it to the correct cost code and approve it in the system. Our ERP doesn't even have that. So for us to get a project manager to review code and approve an invoice, we're having to hand deliver them paper copies in the office, have them handwrite it, or email it to them and have them write it on a PDF and email it back to us, which just opens up the door for, so many inefficiencies. And then we're trying to track down invoices that haven't been, how do you keep track of invoices that haven't been coded and approved? So that was the biggest glaring thing for me with our system when I walked in the door, was like, this is beyond outdated and antiquated, and this is a very broken system. We're a small enough company that we can make it work, but we want to grow. This will, it's caused some minor problems, and I know it would just continue to cause more problems if we didn't address. But also we want it to integrate with, Procore, because we've got our budgets and all of our change orders and all of our subcontracts and all of that is in Procore. And so having the real data feeding back and forth is important to us.
Makes sense. Procore is your project management hub. What are the top three quote unquote non negotiables for the next ERP so it truly plays well with Procore and avoids creating a second system of record?
Yeah, so having something that integrates for the budgets, having something that integrates for the costs will be huge for us, because right now we don't have that. So, all of our budget changes are happening in Procore. And then I'm having to go and manually reconcile the two each month, to make sure that our accounting system has the correct budget in it. So that's a huge thing for us. And then just being able to see, live budget to actuals, if they can talk to each other, then that all is just going to be so much more streamlined. So that'll be nice. And then what I think I mentioned earlier, we're implementing a scheduling platform that integrates with Procore, and what it allows for is some financial forecasting. So, getting the having the information talking between the accounting system and Procore will then backfeed into that scheduling software for us to have better forecasting of our costs and our revenues for those projects, which will be great as we grow.
Actually, who keeps the budget up to date in Procore? Let's say there is a change order. Who's responsible for that?
It's a combination currently of our project managers and our project engineer, who also does submittals. Combination of the people that are processing the submittals and then the project managers.
So a change order does affect a budget, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it can't, well, depending on the nature of the change order, but yeah, so there's a few different types. So we've got an owner change order, which is actually a change in the scope of what we're doing. So we're asking the client, the owner, for more money. But then we also do change orders to the subcontractors. So if we have room in our budget, to cover the cost of a change to a subcontractor, we'll do change orders to the subcontractors. And then we have budget transfers, and our projects, we always have a contingency built in. So some of our changes are coming from that contingency bucket.
So some change orders don't impact your budget.
Mm-hmm. So they'll all impact the budget, just in different ways, I guess. So some of them affect the bottom line, and some of them are just within the budget, if that makes sense.
Your inner west/interwest implementation lessons. You mentioned doing too many things too fast. Tell the failure story. What did you roll out? What went wrong? And what you would do differently next time? Your profile shows you were assistant controller at Interwest Construction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when I joined Interwest Construction, they had started implementing an operational software that had a number of modules to it. So there was a time tracking component, there was a job management component, there was a fleet management component, and an equipment management slash service, like repairs and maintenance type module to it. So they had purchased the software. They had only implemented one of the modules so far when I started. And then in that same time, so they'd sort of implemented one module, and then we're wanting to implement more of the modules. And then we also implemented another separate software for small tools, like a small tool inventory tracking software. I wasn't involved in the procurement of the software they had already started implementing, but was there and involved to some extent with the implementation. And I think the biggest takeaways I had from those, which I know many of your guests on previous episodes have talked about, is not having the field people involved when you're picking these softwares, when you're designing how they're going to be used or vetting how they're going to be used, when you're designing what your rollout's going to look like, or really involving them. And so much of the implementation that happened with that specific software was just okay, we're going to come up with this whole process internally with a couple people, and we're a company of 400, and then we're going to push it out to a big group of people and just tell them how this is going to go. And so many of the challenges that came from those rollouts, I think, came from that method of, we're going to make this decision internally and then we're going to roll it out. So really just echoing what some of your previous guests have said, of you need to have operations people involved when you're picking the software, when coming up with a rollout team, when you're doing the training, when you're doing all of these steps. They need to be involved from the get-go. And then, trying to do too many softwares at one time because you're juggling, okay, we've got this small tool inventory management software that, again, we picked, and we had maybe 2 field people involved with when we picked it. And then we tried to roll it out, and we're rolling it out at the same time that we're rolling out another software. And it was too much software coming at field people all at one time. So just really being thoughtful about who's getting those folks involved that actually have to use it so they can poke holes at it from the beginning. And then, making sure you're not overwhelming people with too much new software all at one time.
For field people, it's very important to have a simple user interface.
Yeah. I think some companies, or just some folks in general, will lose sight of, this tool might make your job in the office easier, but if it's making the field people's job harder, they're the ones that are actually doing the thing. They're the ones doing what we're doing for our business. So we should be trying to make, as much as we can still get the information we need to try and do it in a way that's easier for them and not adding to their day, because they're the ones doing the actual thing. Without them, we can't do our job. So if we're making the field team's life harder, then we're making the entire company's life harder. It doesn't do any good to make accounting's life easier if we're not going to have field people available to actually do their job.
That's so well said. The last section here is 4 jobs, comma real life. CFO plus advisor plus consulting plus trucking ops. You literally have 4 paid roles. CFO plus advisory plus side accounting plus husband's trucking company. Tell us what a quote unquote normal crazy week looks like and
I, yeah.
and how you decide what gets your best energy.
Yeah. So I'm in the process of transitioning away from 4 roles because 4 roles is too many. Part of that came from I wasn't anticipating taking the CFO role so quickly. So yeah, my husband and I own his trucking company. We've owned it since 2019. So that's just kind of an ongoing. I've gotten used to juggling that one because we've done that one for long enough. But the advisor and the consulting came about from the last position I was in before Haley. So when I moved to Arizona, I worked for a law firm in town there, a law firm that actually helps Haley Construction with various legal matters. And so when I was leaving to come to Haley, I wanted to help them with their transition, make sure everything went smoothly. And in my time there, I had also taken on doing all of the accounting work for 2 of their major clients. So I agreed to keep doing that accounting work. And so I've continued to do that. We did just transition the client's accounting work to another accountant as of 2 weeks ago because it was getting to be a little bit too much. And the law firm's kind of at the point where they don't necessarily need me so much. The person that had taken over in my role was not an experienced bookkeeper by any stretch, and so they just really wanted to make sure that that was going to be a smooth transition. And since Haley and the law firm have such a strong long-term relationship, everybody was on board with me helping to support them long term. But I'd say now I'm closer to just 2 jobs.
Nice. Congratulations on just having 2 jobs.
Yeah, thank you. But with 4 jobs with 2 young kids was a little bit too much because it was getting up, people that have worked with me in the past know that I tend to work weird hours because my husband gets up at anywhere between midnight and 2 o'clock to go start his day for work. So a lot of times I would get up when he got up and do, a couple hours of work in the morning, and then my kids would wake up, and then we'd be getting ready and get them off to school, and then I'd come here and start my day here and do a full day here, and then leave and go get my kids and do dinner and all that, and then sometimes be doing work in the evenings. Then we're always doing the trucking company on the weekend. So sometimes that's literally actually doing repair work on a truck, on a semi truck.
The last question is trucking plus construction plus audit perspective. What's one lesson from transportation ops or Saturday truck maintenance with the kids that made you a better construction finance leader? Your profile reflects leadership in a trucking business and a long running consulting practice.
Yeah, I think troubleshooting was probably the best skill that I've learned from trucking because if your truck's not moving, you're not making any money. So there's many times where, if my husband's truck breaks down, he's calling me and we're going through options of how to get him back moving on the road. We do 95% of the repair work ourselves. The only things we aren't doing are like transmissions and motors. Aside from that, it's him and I, mostly him. But just learning how to troubleshoot with, lots of times trying to use, maybe we don't have the exact right part, or trying to brainstorm a solution that is just a temporary fix to get us by, but really learning how to pivot on the fly and come up with a different game plan is a big thing, and anybody that works in trucking can relate to that, of just trying to come up with ways to keep yourself moving, having that ability to, this was my game plan for today, and now I have to pivot and go this other way. I mean, anybody in accounting can relate to that of, I came in with my mindset I was going to do this today, and then some other thing happened and now my day is completely derailed. So having that ability to pivot and be willing to be flexible and willing to troubleshoot options for things.
It is 5% of maintenance you guys do yourself.
Yeah.
Have you considered opening a truck maintenance company?
I actually pitched that idea to my husband recently, and he said, yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do more maintenance than I already have to do.
Yeah. Krystal, thank you so much for your time. I had a great
Yeah.
conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for this podcast. I've really enjoyed listening to it.
Thanks for listening to Finance at the Job Site. If you found today's conversation valuable, share it with a teammate and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. You can listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or watch on YouTube. Just search Finance at the Job Site. Until next time, here is to building smarter, faster, and more profitable projects.